Hello, happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to Commissioner Wilson's virtual office hours.
Happy Friday. Yay.
Thank you so much for joining. I hope you all are having a wonderful week and that you're ready for the weekend.
Yes, I definitely get excited this time on Fridays.
Mhm.
And, Lee, I'm looking outside right now and it's a little drizzly. We've had a couple of squalls coming through, and it makes me realize I wanted to start out by kind of sending my love and thoughts to the people of Texas right now and other parts of the country that have been impacted by the dramatic weather patterns this week. I
Mhm.
think we have to, of course, short term do anything we can to get people safe and warm and fed and clean water,
Mhm.
because I do think that right now it's a man-made humanitarian crisis in that they
Mhm.
didn't really do a great job of shoring up their grid. But I also think it's a good time for us to, and we've talked about this before, consider that as if our climate, as our temperature as a planet goes up, and the globe warms, we're going to continue to see these erratic patterns.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of people still think, even though the science is pretty conclusive, that global warming means warming. But really, what it means is that because there's such a difference in the overall temperature of the oceans and the air, that we end up with some very, very, very dramatic weather patterns that are unlike anything we've seen.
Mhm.
So from the flooding that we see to what's now going on in Texas,
Mhm.
we really have to look at what we've done to alter those weather patterns.
Mhm. I mean, I have to say, I told Commissioner Wilson before she brought me on the team, that I'm a climate activist and sometimes my views are a little bit extreme. And I was actually really concerned about being a member of your team originally because I wasn't sure if I was too extreme in my views because climate change is a very serious threat. And I'll always remember the thing you said to me is that you encouraged it and that you
Yeah,
wanted to
I
make the
think it's
public
I think
known.
it's interesting that you said the word extreme. What you're doing is you're identifying something that's putting us all in peril. That's
Mhm.
really actually, it's wise.
Mhm.
It's based on science and facts,
Mhm.
and it is, if we have a future at all, we have to address it in ways big and small. Which I think here we talk about sometimes the frustrations we have trying to address it in a big way, and then we sort of have to embrace when we see some of the small changes and some of the small ways, because
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
sustains us and we can keep
Mhm.
moving. And I think that'll lead to some of the conversations we had this week with um, about micromobility, about
Mhm.
transportation
Mhm.
updates, and maybe it'll be a good segue into some of the issues that came up in meetings this week and what we're going to see on the agenda next week. But just know that from from my perspective from this office, we're always going to keep an eye on that data and the facts, and it's going to drive policy goals. And the data and the science and the facts support that we have to make a big change in the way that we put out carbon and the way that we are operating as a globe,
Mhm.
if we're going to stop the path that we're on right now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of issues in Florida in general, county to county throughout the entire state is the lack of wanting to even say it out loud.
It's
It's not
crazy to
it's
me.
not even like we're at a point where policy can change because there's still a lot of
It's
denial out
crazy to me. I
there.
met people that were in Florida's Environmental Protection Division when Rick Scott was governor. They weren't allowed to say it. They were told to call it
Nuisance flooding.
nuisance flooding, um, erratic weather patterns. They weren't allowed to use the actual scientific terms, which,
Mhm.
you know, tells you everything that you need to know about what was driving the policy. So if your leader isn't being driven by facts and data
Mhm.
and the actual events that are happening in front of their eyes, then you need new
Mhm.
leadership. So
Yep.
yeah, I mean, that's in Florida. We're a peninsula.
Mhm.
We're at risk all over the state. So
Yeah, and this is something that I also love that you say, and this will be perfect, it's a perfect segue into the next thing. You need to make room for the science and believe in the science to make room for innovation.
yeah,
And if you don't accept the science, then you're actually holding back the economy. You're holding back
Yes.
job creation. You're holding back the innovation and the science advancements that
I'm
we
always
need.
fascinated by this false tension that I believe is created by the oil and gas industry in order to create division amongst those of us who are really trying to do both things, right? Protect protect our environment, try to make sure our carbon footprint is decreasing every day, and generating good jobs, better jobs in those fields and those technologies. You know, it was interesting when the military, when the Pentagon came out and listed climate change as a top national security risk. We saw all of a sudden some real technology drivers coming in and some, you know, and so I think it's an interesting thing that once it's identified and called out and looked at for what it is,
Mm-hmm.
then technology is going to follow up and understand that what that then brings is jobs, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
then we understand that there's going to be some different form of creating either a power grid or the way that we are going to operate transportation systems.
Mm-hmm.
So I see those all as opportunities, not as inhibitors. And I think that's going to have to be the way that we approach all of it, that those things are can be really great economic drivers.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say, if you compare us to other countries, right, we are so far behind in so many other categories and industries. And there's a lot of synergy between addressing the climate crisis and innovating our way out of this problem. One major factor would be transportation,
Yes, yes.
you know?
Which is a hot topic right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you all had, if you saw the newspaper, I think it was last week, or I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
my weeks are getting kind of mushed together, really. There was a time capsule buried when they built the courthouse, and Linda Chapin at the time was the chairperson, which is what we now call the mayor, and she really was groundbreaking, and I give her so much credit for leading the way for any of us in elected positions that followed her. They had an opportunity to sit down and write what they thought they would see this area looking like by 2020. And so here it is, 2021. They were a little late opening up the time capsule because, of course, we had, you know, a pandemic kind of pushed back that opening date. They opened it up, and one of the items that was in there was optional transportation modalities for people who live in Central Florida to get from the airport out to Disney and beyond. And here we are. Here
Still
we are.
walking.
Yeah, here we are. Um, and the exciting thing that's going to be coming up on the agenda on Tuesday will actually, I believe, in my tenure, hopefully we'll see some real progress in this because Brightline is presenting on their plans for the second and I believe third part of their connectors. They already have a high-speed rail um, running from Miami to I think it's North Palm Beach, where they have continued on along the 95 I-95 corridor, and then will be following the I think it's either 528 or 417, depending
Mm-hmm.
on which option they look at. It coming into Orlando and on over to Tampa. So the idea of coming to Florida, not having to put gas in a car, you know, pulling all those cars off our roadways, and still being able to really see, visit, enjoy, spend your money,
Mm-hmm.
invest in Florida is so exciting. I think we are on the truly on the horizon of seeing great opportunities because as they do that, they will provide and bring extra employment opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
and hopefully that will continue to encourage those type of innovations in our
Mm-hmm.
area.
Yeah, you said something that I never thought of. You said when people come to Orlando, they have to choose between the East Coast or the West Coast, and now with this
Yeah,
innovation, they might not have to.
yeah.
You know.
Anyone that's been on I-4 coming from St.
Mm-hmm.
Pete or Clearwater or Sarasota to try to get to the Space Coast, you know that that can be as daunting as any day of travel anywhere around the world. And the idea of being able to hop on a high-speed train and zip over to see a launch of some kind at the Space Coast, or
Mm-hmm.
go kayaking somewhere on you know in the Indian River area, and then you know sometime being back over for a Bucks game, is just so exciting. And I do think it's going to be a great economic driver. I do think it's going to be great for Floridians. I think there are times that, we would really take the opportunity to go do things that we sometimes think it seems overwhelming to put that kind of gas money in our car, spend that much time on the road. The congestion in all areas of Florida continues to grow. And the answer to the congestion is not to build more roads, because we know that that building roads just brings more congestion. So, and I think this kind of ties into our concerns about even the um, sort of disapproved and unpopular amongst people who really care about Florida and about wildlife and about the environment. The new toll roads that Tallahassee, that lawmakers have tried to get moving, cutting right through some of our most critical wildlife corridors, and the communities that they're going to affect are in opposition. People who care about imperiled species and all wildlife are in opposition, but for some reason lawmakers have identified that as some kind of a economic driver. And I feel like if we're really going to look at transportation and economic drivers, that we need to look at something we haven't been able to achieve. Voters in Florida asked for high-speed rail years ago. And once again, this was, as Rick Scott was coming in, and much like, some of the other voter mandates in amendments that were put on a ballot, the people that were in charge diluted or deferred and watered down those mandates, even though they were put into the Constitution by the voters of Florida. So, we need to make good on those promises.
And all of our roads are really designed. We just learned this today, back in the World War II era, to get from point A to point B. But when the tourists come, even with a high-speed rail, the safety that a pedestrian or that a citizen needs to get in between those points, it's not there. We're actually one of the most dangerous place for pedestrians in the entire country.
Yeah, it was really alarming. Bike Walk Central Florida spoke with us about some of their initiatives and about Best Foot Forward, and they are really honing in alongside, shoulder to shoulder, with the municipalities, with the county, with law enforcement, in identifying crosswalks of concern and trying to make sure that by education, by engineering, by some improvements of visibility, that we are making pedestrian crosswalks safer for pedestrians and also bicyclists. But when you talk about people coming to visit here, most of them, many people in this world live in places where they walk and bike everywhere. And they come to a region where people rarely walk and bike everywhere, and where the solution to every problem seems to be to add a lane and increase the speed limit by 10 miles per hour. It's not a solution, right? We're putting people in danger, and the statistics show that it's deadly for our visitors. So we need to make sure that when we talk about bringing people back and keeping hospitality vibrant, that we're also talking about how we make people who are visiting here feel safe and secure, and that includes the ability to walk from place to place without being in danger.
Now, we also learned a lot about micromobility, which I can't believe there's so much science and data, and I think it's still evolving. I think the information is still evolving, because there are still some safety concerns.
Yes. And I it's a very interesting thing. I think if you've traveled to Paris, London, I'm not sure about which American cities have seen a growth in this. You'll recognize the Lime scooter, or the Lime or Orange or Bird scooter or bike. There's many different contracts out there with individual private businesses that provide these micro mobility options. And what they are is, it's an app that you can get on your phone. Then if you're in that city and you come across one of those devices, either the bike or the scooter, you can use that app to purchase a certain amount of time on that scooter, use it for whatever transportation option you need, and then potentially really just deposit that on the other side. Well, that type of option for transportation has some pros, like the idea that it's an alternative to being stuck in your car, that it is a way for people to get quickly from one thing to another by being off the roadway and potentially getting a different perspective of a city. The cons are that it is we don't have roadways designed for that type of travel, for scooters that are motorized that will need to probably either share the roadway, or if they are utilizing some other kind of a path or sidewalk, that it would need to be something that's not your standard. So those are considerations that have come up in various municipalities within Orange County, and it came before the board in the past, and the staff here took that information and went out and gathered some data, looked at some studies, and did some pretty deep dive on feasibility of utilizing in Orange County and in different areas of Orange County. And so we'll be hearing a little bit more about that on Tuesday. My 2 cents on it, it's, if you've ever been in an area where they have those scooters, it's a blast. But the only place that I've seen them that I don't feel like it's really a scary recreational activity are areas that have big, wide, open spaces. So areas where within a walkway, I'm not going to call it a sidewalk because really it's broad in that trail, if you will, but paved, where there are the potential to have a biker, a scooter, two walkers, and nobody is coming close to anybody else. I think in areas where we are already really squeezing out your sort of average pedestrian activity, to add a motorized micro mobility component, it makes me concerned. I'm concerned about the safety, and I also wonder how accessible it can be for people who don't have a cell phone with an app that they put a credit card on. It's not like it's a true bike share where we share a bike, it's paid for, we don't need really that much maintenance on it. They're truly motorized, they're run by private industry, and the contracts are paid for by users. So you agree to the user terms when you get the app. You put some money on the card, and then you can use the scooter. I mean the scooter or the bike. And I think if going forward there's a way to make it more accessible. I don't know. Maybe it becomes more appealing in areas where there are mobility issues. I think that's something to keep an eye on and to think about.
Yeah, I know they did mention that. I think they partner with different leadership and organizations in underserved communities to make sure that these contracts, at least 20% of the bikes, are being distributed fairly so that it is equitable. But there is a concern of well, what if you don't have a credit card, or what if you don't have a bank account? Right. You should still have. And I mean,
there are communities that I think, in full understanding of what their challenges are, would be concerned about that type of a ride share anyway, knowing that there's a little bit of the you kind of pick it up on this corner and drop it 3 corners from here. What if I'm going to get blamed for something that happens to this? What if this is what if the next person that uses it says that I hit something and I didn't? And I think depending on which what world you come from, that can be daunting. That the idea of being somehow scrutinized for utilizing a ride share or a micromobility machinery that's expensive, and then somehow being held responsible for it can be very intimidating.
Yeah, and I'm sure that this is a public safety concern, and I'm sure a lot of you will want to make your voices heard on something like this. So go ahead and you can email district1@ocfl.net if you have any questions about what micromobility is. We can share the PowerPoint with you.
And this will be an ongoing dialogue, because I think we know more now than we did when they first presented. I think we'll continue to learn things. I think getting the public involved is a way to make sure that communities where there is a good purpose and a safer way to do it, that we're really not eliminating them by identifying the places that maybe it's not a good fit for.
And feel free to drop your questions in the comments as well, and the commissioner will take some of those questions at the end. I would love to see some of these comments also appear on the Vision 2050. Coming up, there's actually going to be a series of town halls.
Yes, here we go. So we have talked about Vision 2050. We're going to keep talking about Vision 2050 because I know that you all have expressed your concern and your interest in the development and growth of Orange County, and especially in the districts that have not been, are traditionally either rural or have more country feel. This is our opportunity to be heard. I have been a little bit frustrated on more than one occasion this week in finding out about approvals that happened before I got here, but that the visual and operational effect of that approval will take place now, where I have to drive by it and see it, where I hear from people who are legitimately concerned that it was a bad fit. And all I keep thinking about whenever I hear that we are that we are watching unfold decisions that were made years ago, sometimes many years ago, sometimes 4 or 5 years ago, is that now we talk about everything that happens from here, going into the future, all those plans, and Vision 2050 is the big Orange County plan, comprehensive plan for the next part of our future. And if you are frustrated with the way that planning and growth has happened, now is your time to really get involved. Go to the Orange County website. There's a tab that says Vision 2050. What were the dates that are coming up? There's, right in front of me. Sorry, I've got it right in front of me. And because it's a process.
Yep.
And
Nope.
sorry.
I'll go grab the dates. Hold on one second.
It's a process, and what happens. Oh, yeah, I got it. Sorry. This is why I shouldn't be trusted with piles of paper. The place types is what they're talking about at the next series of meetings. And there's something that I want to be clear about. I think that when you tune in to the planning meetings that happen, we have all these brilliant people that work here that do planning and engineering and for a living. They studied it. They know the terms. They know the acronyms. And as somebody who has no experience in that, but I know what my community looks like and what I think, the mistakes that I've seen made in planning, and I think, well, I don't know how to articulate this. That's okay. That doesn't matter. What the most important thing is that you do articulate something, because they're using a fancy title, word, name, acronym for it. Doesn't mean that you can't describe it another way and still be heard. We'll figure out what that translates to on this end. So, I often, even after looking at these things for long periods of time, have to go back and reference, okay, now what was that? What does that initial stand for? And what is the footnote for that type of a zoning? You know what? It's all out there. Those are all things that are available to us that we can dig up and try to resolve. And I think it's really important that you know that you don't have to be an expert in planning to have really great ideas. And in fact, I think the answer to some of the things that we've seen in some of our challenges are out there, and they're being talked about, and they just need to make it in here. And they need to make it in here, through me, through Vision 2050's actual, specific surveys, and anywhere else that you have the opportunity to give those public comments. We work for the residents of Orange County, so it's not just a suggestion, it's really a task that we are relying on the public for.
And there's still surveys available online. If you go ahead and just look up Orange County, Florida Vision 2050, you can do the surveys. Honestly, I thought the surveys were a little vague, personally.
They are. And what they're doing is they're moving through components of the planning, and the surveys are attached to those components. That being said, if the surveys themselves aren't capturing what you want to say as you're saying it, write it down, put it in an email form. We will make sure it gets to the right people that are actually going through this process, through planning and zoning and through that department. So yes, that's their way of making sure that when they tally options and preferences, that they've done it in a systematic way. But it doesn't mean that if you have open-ended public comments that you shouldn't share them. So Monday, March 22nd, 6 p.m. Wednesday, March 24th at 6 p.m. Thursday, March 25th at 6 p.m. The next two are other districts or affect other districts. Thursday, April 1st, also at 6 p.m. And I want to also just clarify, because I still don't really think anyone has explained to me why they're calling them market areas instead of districts. So the reason why District 1 is affected by more than one of these meetings and why we sort of overlap is that they, for the purposes of planning, have identified them as market areas. I'm not sure um, what the rationale was behind that, but just know that when you look at it, if they talk about the South Market area or the Northwest Market area, look at the map. You're going to know District 1 is a little bit in both of those. And so that's, honestly, even if that's not your residents, your immediate community, but you have an understanding about the community at large, it's still very, very relevant. We live in Orange County, in not just in our little silo, right? We use our airport here. We go shopping outside of our districts. We go to school, college, visit friends. We understand the interactions with the municipalities. We like to visit the farmers market and Winter Garden. So this is going to affect just your more than just your sort of your inner neighborhood circle, and you can participate within that development of the comprehensive plan wherever you feel comfortable and wherever you think is important to give that feedback.
So feel free to drop any comments or questions in the comments below, or also email district1@ocfl.net. Also, I know a lot of people have concerns about COVID-19 and the vaccination and when that's going to happen. If you wanted to share some updates about that.
Yes, I think we are. I know this has been. I really wish I was looking into the camera and being like, "We're done.
It's over."
It's not. It's not. But this week, the progress in the percentages of vaccinated is starting to show in our overall positivity rate. And when you see that positivity rate, even if it's an incremental slow decline coming down, what that means is we're gaining on the vaccination percentages enough to start seeing some community effects. And that's the ideal. We're probably never going to get to 100% vaccinated just because there are people that won't. But if we get to, I think the percentage is somewhere in the 80% of our population there, then what we've essentially done was provided the herd immunity that we need to go back to normal life. I think it's going to be it's still a long time away. We still have a lot of people out there with pre-existing conditions that are essential workers, our teachers, especially our teachers who have pre-existing conditions. Even our law enforcement right now have not been on Governor DeSantis's list of preferred vaccine recipients. And when I hear from people in our community and they say, Orange County is doing a great job in the logistics of getting people in and out of the convention center, and Orange County is doing a great job of communicating when the portal opens, but why aren't we taking care of people with comorbidities? Why aren't we taking care of our teachers? Then I really, really, really think it's important for you to know that's your governor. We have no ability no discretion when it comes to the way that the priority is decided. So we are partnering with the Department of Health. There are federal guidelines and federal mandates that Orange County works under. And I do believe that, the sort of the heart and soul of Orange County's fire, rescue, emergency services, even the people that are working, in our offices of innovation and budget, trying to get that bridge over for the eviction diversion. You're seeing Orange County working night and day to do what they can in the sphere of things that they have the ability to work in. But deciding that those priorities are dictated to us by Governor DeSantis. And I think it's really critical knowing that we really want people to come visit us again here in Orange County. Orange County is very different than some of the other counties in Florida in that we do have a younger median age. We have essential workers in that we have people who are working in kitchens and restaurants and in hotels, in transportation that are considered essential personnel based on based on the same structure that the federal and state government put out of who's essential. And those people really need to be vaccinated. I think our teachers should have been vaccinated already. Orange County did have a special day they set aside for a pod of teachers 65 and older. Advent Health and Orlando Health have both set aside days that you can find a link to on the Orange County website for people in the healthcare field that may not necessarily be affiliated with one of those hospitals, if they are a tertiary provider or independent provider, that they can still be vaccinated. But we still have so many people that really, should have been priorities, I believe, in the overall recovery of this area that we just haven't been able to get in yet. We're ready. We're ready. If you tuned into the mayor's press conferences or looked online at what comes out of the emergency services department here, they are ready. They are staffed. Our paramedics have done just this amazing job. The firefighters, the nurses that have come through from the Department of Health, they're ready. We just need the supply, and we need the discretion to broaden the list of people who are prioritized.
So go ahead and drop any questions or comments. We hear some really sad stories. Shout out to Ann Vollmer, our research aide, who has been helping constituents that have emailed. And many people, they want to just know, is there CARES Act funding? Is there any rental assistance? COVID is not just vaccinations. I know that we're just talking about that because it's such a new process.
And it changes daily. And let me remind, while we're talking about that, before we move on to the rental assistance, because that is a thing we need to talk about too. But the portal for the vaccine website for Orange County, so this is the one specifically that is overseen by the county and takes place at the convention center. It will open February 22nd again at 9 a.m. I know it's very frustrating if you haven't been able to utilize that portal, but I want you all to know that the reason why they have been really cautious about opening and closing it is because they do not want a single Orange County resident to be in a line somewhere waiting on something that's not there for them. And that has happened all across the country, where people have sat overnight in a car in a parking lot just to find out that there was no supply. So the appointments that go out are very specifically intended to fill those spots. They are then taking any cancellations and refilling those spots so that there's not a drop that's wasted, not a vaccine that's wasted. So I just want to make sure that I remind people that's going to be February 22nd at 9 a.m. If you haven't already and you're doing this for a loved one that's over 65 that's eligible, go ahead and pre-register them. Go to the Orange County, Florida website. There's a tab that says registration. You can set all that up so that when the portal opens, that you don't have to start from scratch. It doesn't mean you're going to be able to make an appointment. It just means that you've got an account that's already established, and that could be helpful in logging in and getting through.
Alrighty, so we had a pretty fun week. You actually went and had a meeting with Disney and got a chance to put some faces to some names.
Yeah, so this was really cool because actually it was Reedy Creek, which is sort of the, if you think of Disney as, sort of, we really know a lot about what happens on the stage in all the, the
colors and
fireworks. all the beautiful things and pictures that come out of there and family vacations that happen there. Behind the scenes, Reedy Creek is really, for all purposes, it's actually its own little government. And when I say that, what I mean is they have their own utilities operations. They have their own, they take care of their own roadways. They have their own fire service. And so it's fascinating, and it was a really great opportunity for me to meet the people who are sort of our counterparts in Reedy Creek and find out about their operations and find out what some of their challenges are and how they are working through those challenges. Obviously, this was not on the business operations side, and I'm sure that's going to be coming in the future, and finding out how, what this year has meant to the business operations side. But this was really sort of the infrastructure of Disney. And that includes also Bay Lakes, that includes Lake Buena Vista, And the other component to that was being able to see what has been put in place and what will continue to be offered in the future when it's possible to student interns and their summer university program from all over the world. Students come in and participate, and I have many friends that I've known since I moved here that came here when they were in college and stayed, met their spouses here, and now their kids are, interested in working there and have, so those histories and it runs very deep, and so it was a really interesting thing to see its development. They grew out of the facilities that they were using for those students, and they really wanted to try to offer some space that included some multi-purpose for things like if there was other academic opportunities. So there are what looks like lecture halls. There's study areas where if you're working on some kind of research that you have the ability to print and you can go and do some really good academic work on site. And then there's also really just the life part of it. For a young person, it was like the dream dorm. It was really, if you can imagine what a college student dorm that Disney dreams up would look like, this was it. And I really just wanted to stay. So it was great to see. It made me really sad that it was empty. This was the year it was going to be, filled with young people and people from all over the world that have worked really hard to try to get there. So hopefully we're going to round the corner and see that happen. I know that it's been the team that's put that together and worked on this for a long time. They're eager to get students here and get them plugged in and get that life experience for them and educational opportunities. So yeah, we'll be in touch with them. If you have any questions about it, we gathered a lot of information, and I have some good contacts that we can pursue if you have any questions that we can help you get to.
And another update. I don't know if this is a good segue or not, but there are some companies, some corporations out there that you brought up an article that the Orlando Sentinel did.
Oh, yeah. This is not a good segue.
Yeah, but
okay. So let's clear the air. So there was an article this week, and I think it's actually the issue itself is more important than, and we'll just talk about it in broad terms, because I think it's something that Floridians are going to have to address, because anytime that we go through a crisis, because this happened back when there was the housing crisis in 2008. We talked about it again before that, or actually we started. I remember the first time this sort of came up and around was after 9/11, because there was a downturn in the economy, in travel, in sales tax. Florida, because we don't have a income tax, we really rely heavily on every other tax base. Our tax for revenue, we rely heavily on other forms. One of those, of course, and especially locally, primarily locally, is property tax. And a property tax is determined by a wide variety of factors, so it would be way too boring for this for this segment. But if you ever had any questions, I could definitely, I'm geeky enough to talk you through it if it's something you're curious about. But I did have a conversation with an investigative reporter about it at some point, because there's always this question about why right in the middle of what looks like a fairly residential area or a commercial area or even an office park area, you see some cattle. And the reason why is because it's a tax loophole that, much like other taxes that were set into place to benefit people who needed it, and at the time, the intention was to make sure that our farmers weren't squeezed out of increasing property values. Development in the area continues to be, obviously very lucrative. And so there was a concern, and a very valid concern on the part of the agriculture industry, that farmers wouldn't be able to compete with private developers. Well, the backfire of that intent is that private developers just then became farmers. And when I say that, I'm using the word farmer extremely loosely. That means they throw a couple cows on the property, wait for all of their plans for whatever that property is going to develop into to fall into place, and then they put whatever they want to on it. So, if you've been in Central Florida for any period of time, you've driven by an area that had some cows, and then the next time you drove by it, there was a senior living facility sprouting up, or a strip mall. And so the conversation I had in the article, the title of the article was great. What was it? A cash cow? was really looking at the instability of that tax structure and closing those loopholes so we can have a more stable tax base. Because as homeowners, you shouldn't have to bear all the stability, right? And our business entities that don't, quickly switch hats like that shouldn't have to bear all the responsibility. So what does that look like? I'm not a property appraiser. I don't work in the tax collector's office. It'd be interesting to continue the conversation, but my understanding of it academically, and so the conversation that I had with the reporter at the Orlando Sentinel was that it's a tax loophole, and that might, like most tax loopholes, if we close it, we would have the opportunity for a tremendous revenue source. And I think the flip side of that is that residents also have a better understanding of what the true plans are for whatever that parcel of land is. I think any land use that happens doesn't happen in isolation of its neighbors. And when people drive by what they believe is an agricultural space because it's zoned agricultural, because it's being taxed agriculturally, and then it turns into a high rise, high density apartment complex, luxury apartment complex, that they often feel like something what they were tricked, they were misled, that they felt that there was, and I think residents are savvy enough to understand that that must have been something that provided a benefit to the developer. I think they get that. But yes, some of our biggest developers in the area own, these chunks of land that are zoned agricultural and are assessed at a extreme discount. Even though they will within a period of years turn into an extremely profitable, completely different use than agriculture. So and I would love to continue the conversation with some people in agriculture, small farmers, small farming operations that really need that tax structure in place, and how to keep it and sort of squeeze out the abusers so that we can get what I believe is the fair share of an appraised value, knowing that that's going to be a luxury apartment complex.
And there's no way to see it coming either.
Well, there is if you follow. Sure, there is. If you are, the geeks that we have in here, our team of geeks that follow things like the planning and zoning, the DRC, you can watch the evolution of that change, because the property owner and oftentimes a developer and then their legal counsel come forward with, how they want to alter what that is going to be identified, what that property will be identified in the future, and there are steps to do to get them there. So yeah, if you keep a close eye on it, but I think it just doesn't pass the smell test for most of us that are driving down a road. And on the right side, there's a Fuddruckers and an Applebee's, and on the left side, there's 2 cows and what's left of an orange grove. And you think, I wonder if this is going to what is this going to be? Well, I can guarantee you, it's probably designated, it's probably owned by and possibly even leased to a farmer. That's the other thing they do, is they'll lease those so that they can qualify for those exemptions. And
Wonderful.
yeah, so that's that story. And if you read the story, it's great, because there's and I think they do a wonderful job detailing some sources that you can take the reading further, because there were some studies done academically about this type of zoning across the country. We're not the only ones to have done this, and so within that research, there were really some pretty good policy changes that could be updated, that wouldn't be throwing out the baby with the bathwater, and trying to keep some of the protections in while closing the loophole to people who were trying to take advantage.
Do we have any questions so far, Ernest, that you noticed? Okay.
All right, so Nick Littell says, I'm really excited about high-speed rail coming, but my experience in Europe and Asia showed me that it doesn't work as well without regional rail feeding it. Are the plans moving forward to expand regional rail and making sure systems are interconnected?
Oh, I got chills from that one, Nick. That was a great question. And yes, you are spot on. There has to be an intermodal opportunities in order for that to work for us in every use that we really need. The portion that we're talking about right now is not that intermodal portion. This is the high speed components that will link Miami to Orlando, Orlando to Tampa. But the private entity that is moving forward with this project is also very interested in making sure that it lines up with the intermodal and transportation options for light rail or other commuter opportunities, because if you look at, like you said, if you look at the ridership that they'll get on their, it's a good business decision for them. It's also good planning decision, because once we set that into place, the infrastructure for that, then there's something to build off of. If you have an opportunity to Google the Brightline Terminal Orlando International Airport, if you Google it, pull it up, take a look at, I think there's some aerial photos. It's done, and you'll see on one side, you can tell it looks like a Eurorail, Eurostar type of track, and on the other side, it's a little lower set and kind of a different shape. That is prepared for the commuter or light rail or whatever intermodal transportation options that we decide, or I should say, the community decides to move forward with in the future. But yes, it is part of the conversations. I am not on the. There are several committees of people that are made up of leaders from all of the stakeholder governments. So Orange County, Osceola County, Polk County, Seminole County. There are committees made up of those. They get updates and come up with advisory memos, and then we will see sort of the end product of those advisory memos and memoranda of understanding after they come through their committee. What we're going to see on Tuesday was that the plans for the high-speed component of it there was a resolution of understanding in the memoranda of those plans. I don't have the details yet of where exactly those rights of way are going to be. I know that that's going to be something that will develop in the days and weeks to come, including lots of community meetings. I was very clear when I spoke with the people that I met with about this issue, that my biggest concern are my constituents and residents of Hunters Creek, and I know that they are in an area that is a sort of a crossroads for transportation already, and so I'm very aware and conscious of their concerns, and we started out with those dialogues and we'll continue those dialogues. So yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I can dream about a day that I get a cup of coffee, sit down with a newspaper, and don't take my car anywhere to get around town and get my work done.
One day. Any other questions? No? So the last thing, which I hate to leave on like a sad note, but I think as long as people know that you care about these things, you've had quite a few constituents reach out about deforestation and Gotha and flooding, and we had quite a few people reach out about this project called Fire Creek.
Yes, and I am if I could call my commissioner and yell, I would. I am as equally frustrated and disheartened, and quite frankly, I was really shocked when I drove by the site that's been cleared. I immediately called, emailed, tried to hunt down the history of this project, and lo and behold, the approvals were put into place in 2016. I believe there were community meetings in 2015, and so I had at no point an opportunity, nor was I advised of what was going to happen there. And so I want you all to know, if you are watching this, that if there was any chance at all for me to have kept the integrity of the forest that was there, the trees that were mature, and the character that was promised in a rural settlement, that I would have made those choices. I had no voting options when these things came up for a vote. I was not a resident of Gotha when the residents of Gotha went for those community meetings. I am collecting a file so I understand exactly what the process was. And so that moving forward, if there are any opportunities for us to contribute to the way that the development continues to, um, well, develop, that if there's any opportunity at all for us, for me to have input and for you to have input, that we'll do that. And so I just want you to know that it makes me feel very sad because um, I feel like watching something in front of my eyes that, happened years ago, um, and that I wasn't able to warn or let you know about because I didn't know about it. And so we are trying really hard to try to keep ahead of anything like that. I had more than one very tense conversation this week with potential developers in areas that are areas of concern to our residents, that I've talked to residents about, and I am being as clear and direct with those interested parties as I can. I will continue to need you to tell me about the things that you know about. The staff that does meet with us about these things, they do a great job, but we're not their only district. And when I say that, that they brief us, what I mean is I sometimes call in a panic or email in a panic about something that we've heard about, and then they bring us forward a history of that particular proposed development or development plans and the history of the zoning changes that happen. I get very frustrated with the idea of the changes that we see in what were supposed to have been very comprehensive plans from a comprehensive plan. Orange County's comprehensive plan was supposed to be both those things, and I feel like it's an oxymoron because it's neither comprehensive nor a good plan. But I honestly feel that we have the opportunity now to continue to sculpt the next one, and anywhere that we have a chance to try to direct private entities and private stakeholders to make good decisions based on the community's wants and needs, that we'll pursue that. So I would like to tell you that every day this week was sunshine and roses, but it wasn't. I had some days where I was really feeling very disheartened and frustrated and wondering if I am going to be able to be effective, knowing that so much of what rolls out in the next year were things that were decided before I ever got here. And so just bear with me, continue to have these conversations with me. We will try to find solutions everywhere we can. And I'm with you. Yeah.
I'm sure it's overwhelming. I don't understand. You're driving down a place that has tremendous, beautiful tree coverage. You're seeing lots with homes that stretch for over an acre. You're seeing really small community buildings and businesses. And then you see what looks like this plan of this, let's say, apartment complex or skyrise or what have you. And you're like, who on earth thought that
was going to be a good
was,
idea there? Yes, that's exactly right. So, and it's kind of, it's like that.
Isn't the comprehensive plan supposed to be the spine of like yes or no?
Yes. And so this is this full circle conversation that we're having about how important that feedback is, because what you're seeing a lot of times is that the original comprehensive plan did designate those things in some meaningful way. But as an applicant, landowner, developer comes forward, they ask for amendments to the comprehensive plan. They ask for text amendments. They ask for zoning amendments. They ask for some kind of a variance or waiver they're asking for. And so those are the things that, every other Tuesday afternoon I buckle my seatbelt, because I know that these were plans put into the works a long time ago. They're now coming across our desks, and some of them just make no sense to me in an overall holistic planning vision. They're contradictory to the original comprehensive plan language. I mean, the example of a rural, Fire Creek was originally, see, this is me with my head's gonna explode again. Fire Creek was originally zoned rural estate country. Before that, it was rural ag. That's like the most, really the most, like, this isn't going to be residential. Then it became, historic, because they designated historic Gotha with the rural, so it was a rural country estate ag, and then bumped it down again to the I can't think of the abbreviation for the next one down, but it was essentially sort of the country estate homes that take place on a larger, but still very compatible with what is a historically rural area. And then they bumped it down again. Now every time that happens, and they bump that down, and they adopt an amendment, they're chipping away at what was the original conceived plans. So part of what we have to look at going forward is how easy or difficult it is, and who all is involved in adopting, text language amendments. Because we've talked about this before, they never talk about whether or not there's going to be water to be provided for the 300 new units in 5, 10, 20 years in an area that is outside the the urban service boundary. They don't, there's very little talk about whether or not that quarter of an acre of negotiated fragile ecosystem is in addition to another quarter of an acre, another quarter of an acre, another quarter of an acre in what is now a devastated basin. And so those are the things that when you look at holistic development, the heavy lifting is yet to come. If I said some things that sounded sort of complex, it's not. It's just what is smart planning, what is smart growth. I think there's a lot of good ideas that go into the original documents that then get eroded. And that's what I meant by some of those things that sounded a little more complex. We started with this and we're going to finish with this. You have to get involved in Vision 2050. You have to make sure that if what you're seeing around your community is affecting your quality of life, your natural world, your ability to walk and bike and to cross the street. I mean, how many of the things that we've talked about today are all affected by sort of these blinders to those development interests? And, I think that I probably sent out a flare this week to the planning, developing community that I'm playing hardball. We're going to try to make sure that we are keeping our promises and that we are really being deliberate in every action, in every decision.
Yeah, I mean, especially when, there just has to be accountability, right? Because you see stretches of empty buildings, empty plazas, and then you go into these nice tucked away rural, 20, 30 mile per hour communities. And it seems like there's some, some accountability that's lacking there. And so I'm really proud of you for taking everything in a stride, and you've really been able to hold your composure. You've been able to really address these things head on. She has a really tremendous vocabulary when otherwise I can only think of 4-letter words if I were in her seat. So I'm just really proud of you because you're doing a really good job at defending the constituents' needs.
You know what? She's being very kind. This is a team effort, and I do have the best team out on the planet, and I feel so grateful that you all understand the vision, that you understand the goals, that you understand that the quality of life of the residents here and of Floridians at large can be affected by everything we do. And it makes me feel emotional. And I get emotional about it because
we're going to start crying every episode, everybody.
I'm not doing that. It does, because I just want to make sure that we're not missing an opportunity we have to make life better for people, and that if there are entities out there that don't care about that we're calling them out and holding them to task. And that's going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be days it's going to be really uncomfortable. So, if I'm eating chocolate by the pound, or doing push-ups to try to burn it off after, and I look odd in my office, they put up with me, and they're so good to me. So feeling very grateful.
Well, do you have any closing remarks to say happy weekend to everybody?
Happy weekend, everybody. Stay safe if you're out driving in this rain, and hopefully the next agenda that passes through, that we'll see some more good news that we can share, and I look forward to it. Stay in touch, please. We really, really love the contact we make with you all, and we're going to be heading out in the community. So those dates will be coming. Stay tuned.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. Stay tuned. Bye bye.